Now, perhaps two most controversial revisions of the 6th edition of the National Broadcasting Commission Code have to do with the removal of content exclusivity and the increase in fines from 500,000 naira to 5 million naira for hate speech.
Well, this has been generating a lot of reactions lately, but the NBC says the amendments were necessary to reposition the Nigerian broadcasting industry and to make it more responsive to emerging realities in the broadcasting industry.
The agency says part of the objectives of the amendments is to protect and promote the local broadcast industry from monopolistic and anti-competitive behavior, the stimulation of advertising revenue into the broadcast industry, and by extension, the local creative industry. These are some of the issues adduced for the amendment. All right, we have with us in the studio lawyer Charles Ibwebu. It's nice to have you join us right now.
Thank you.
Good morning.
Great. Right. And from Abuja, the Director General or the Acting Director General of the National Broadcasting Commission, Professor Armstrong Idachaba, joins us right there. Professor Idachaba, good morning. It's good to have you join us on TVC Breakfast. Okay. Now, I would like to start with you, Professor, in Abuja, if you can hear me. The NBC Code, the 6th NBC Code has generated appreciable or some amount of controversy around, where some industry players say that they were not properly consulted for them to have their input in it. And we also saw the response of the board of NBC saying that they're not in support of the new NBC, the 6th amendment to the NBC Code. Talk to us from the perspective of consultation and having an inclusiveness. How much of that went on?
Thank you very much, and I appreciate you for giving the NBC this opportunity. Let me state first that the code is the Nigeria Broadcasting Code. It's not NBC, it's not the Commission's code, it's the Broadcast Industry Code. Let me say this is the 6th edition of the Broadcast Code. Even from historical times, from the 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th edition, the review of the code has always generated industry interest. And that is expected because when you do a code, you are creating enablement, you are trying to stimulate certain changes, reacting to certain imperatives within the industry. And it is definite that either way you go, you'll have some people that may be slightly affected, largely to their discomfort. And those ones are likely to complain. I recall that even when we reviewed the 2nd, 3rd edition, it used to be a very hectic session. Broadcasters suddenly begin to come with their lawyers, they come with advocates. We used to have some highly vociferous, highly intellectually challenging engagements before we eventually, as a regulatory body, come up with what we are expected to do by law to set up the standards. Let me make the point from the beginning that the act setting up the commission actually gives the NBC the mandate, to set a broadcasting code for the industry and also to disseminate the broadcasting code. That same act also gives the NBC the power to impose sanctions for, including revocation of license for broadcasters who do not play according to the provisions of the broadcasting code. So we find the debate, the energized debate around every review of the code to be quite fulfilling because it gives us perspectives. Unlike we have said traditionally, there's always a time for review. Regarding this particular amendment, and I want to make the point, this is an amendment. It is not the review of the code in its entirety. In 2019, July, in Kano precisely, there was a stakeholder engagement, last of the series, where we reviewed the broadcast code 6th edition. Now, between 2019 and now, there have been some emerging changes, some emerging revolutions within the broadcast industry, propelled by technology and sometimes by shifting patterns in human cultural behavior. And this has necessitated what we have seen and come up with as an amendment. I'm glad you identify a few of the provisions of that amendment. But was there consultation, even when it was just a little amendment? Sure. The amendment itself was precipitated by the 2019 elections, where at the meeting of the Federal Executive Council, it appeared that broadcasters were unable to curb the trend of highly inciting, highly derogatory, highly discriminatory, ridiculous broadcast content that allowed people to freely lampoon political opponents, to freely make comments that were very, very inciting, highly injurious to the psyche and personality of political opponents, to the extent that it became a threat to democracy.
Professor,
And,
let's put a pause a bit so that we can bring in the lawyer to, of course, help us understand this better. A lawyer, one prominent aspect of this code, of course, which is what the professor is saying, is the hate speech part. So a lot of persons have talked about the fine from 500,000 to 5 billion naira. In the light of the pandemic, people are saying that it could be a low time, for the broadcast industry.
Well, the purpose of any regulation, as it is to address a problem. Now, we have seen how several inciting statements in the past, some have been retracted midway and all that, but it has had its effect, wherein there's a negative output to it. So I think this shouldn't be looked at in the light of the pandemic itself. It is meant to address a problem, and when there's a deterrent, people are supposed to know this is the consequences of an action. So before you go out and utter a statement, like recently, you will think of the consequences, and it's meant to make you stop in your tracks rather than go ahead and at the end of the day, you wave it away. The effect on society is multiple, and the regulators have looked at it and have come up with a deterrent, and I think we should just stand by it.
Are you concerned that the board of NBC is not in tandem with the amendment?
Well, yes. I saw the press statement given. Now, it is interesting because the issue is to what effect is that press statement. So if you look at Section 6 of the NBC Act itself, it basically states that the minister can give directives of a general nature on any particular issues within the powers of the commission. And the commission has a duty, it says shall comply. So it's not an obligation, it's not, really the board of the NBC doesn't have that leeway within the ambit of the law to say, oh, we accept this, we do not accept this. The law is very clear. If the minister gives a directive, they are bound to carry out that directive. They do not have a discretion in the matter. So to the point of that press release, is really, except maybe for public opinion, is really of no effect.
Let's bring in the Professor back online to, of course, help us understand this better. Discussions around the amendments have, mostly been centered on hate speech, content production rights, and so on. Can you tell us more about sections that are perhaps being overlooked that will be beneficial to the industry?
Well, before I go there, let me also make the point that even in this amendment, there was wide stakeholder consultation. At the level of the preliminary level, when the committee was set up to look at the reform of the broadcast sector, BON was represented, the Broadcasting Organizations of Nigeria. We had a lot of industry players invited to comment and discuss the issues. I recall vividly that even at that level, a member of the board of the commission was also invited into the committee. So, and we got papers from across industry players. What did we do? Even after aggregating those players, there was a stakeholder session in Lagos on the 25th of March. Again, at the stakeholder session in the 25th of March, the board of the commission was represented by a former director general of the NBC and also serving current board member of the commission, Malam Danladibako. He actually chaired the amendment review session. And we had people from the industry. I recall that Dr. Kazim Akinreti, NUJ, was there. BON was represented. Professor Raf Akinfeleye and a few other intellectuals also attended. So though the law does not specifically say we need to engage everybody But we have done that as a tradition so that we can aggregate viewpoints and have a document that's fairly reflective of industry expectations. Now, regarding what may have been overlooked in this code, and I'm glad you raised that, there are provisions that we have created regarding the coverage of national emergencies. When the pandemic broke, for instance, we discovered to our embarrassment that a few pay television stations were even very reluctant to dedicate airtime, for purpose of social enlightenment and education. We had to more or less appeal to them, cajole them to say, look, at moments of national emergency, media houses, whether local or foreign, operating within the country, have an obligation to conscientize and mobilize the people, especially when it comes to saving lives. So we have made a provision that at times of national emergencies, as a public good, broadcasters in Nigeria must dedicate a certain amount of airtime statutorily, in terms of enlightening the people regarding emergencies like the pandemic. And that is not all. There are provisions that will ensure that advertisers who owe broadcast stations, and that's been a big problem in the broadcast industry. Many people place adverts, and they don't pay these broadcasters. And many of the broadcast stations are going comatose. They are going off air due to debts, huge debts, running in excess of over 8, 9, 10 billion over time that the advertising industry has been owing broadcasters. We are now saying, look, if you owe broadcasters for a very long time, and you are unable to pay, like in 3-4 months, we will invoke the law and ensure that all other broadcasters will not carry your advert. That way you are compelled to pay what you owe the broadcaster. Is that not encouraging viability or sustainability of the broadcast industry? So there are so many, even the provisions that if you are bringing in sporting content, you must dedicate a certain amount of money in also building the local sport industry. Now, that was a provision, a submission that was made by the sports union, and we felt that there was merit in it, and we also incorporated that also in the amendment. So there are several of those provisions that are actually supposed to stimulate and propagate growth within the broadcast sector.
All right,
however,
Professor, let me put you on hold a little bit so we can, try to look at other issues around this. Now, Charles, let me come back to you here. Now,
okay.
on the issue of the hate speech, Nigerians are trying to balance the issue of gagging the media on one hand and the freedom of speech, which is certainly is a fundamental right that the Constitution has given to Nigerians. Now, when it comes to the laws around what you say and is not good for, it's against someone and all of that, there are laws already against the issues of libel and defamation and all of that. How does the NBC situate in this? Is it not a repetition of the same thing?
Not really. So, for example, taking into complicity what you've just said, when there are several laws that cover several aspects of. So, when you talk about libel, for example, it's not the same as hate speech, right? Hate speech has the element of inciting the public with false statements, misrepresentation, and all of that. Libel, of course, it's defamation against the person, what you say, information you use, and all of that. So it's not, they all work together. The same way they work together, the same way someone who is accused of hate speech has defenses if he took steps or if he can prove what he says is actual facts that transpired and he can give evidence of that, of course.
There is this controversy as to what really constitutes hate speech and who is the one to benchmark what you have said now falls in the category of what is hate speech and all of that. So these parameters are still very difficult for Nigerians to really understand as to that thin line between expressing yourself in a hard way and that falling into the category of what constitutes hate speech.
Now, when you consider those elements, there are two things you need to look at. The first issue is, what are the elements within the law that gives definition to that word hate speech? Now, when you look at the hate speech, the law creating it, you have to go piecemeal and you prove it. So it's not so much as if you're accused of hate speech. It still has to go to court. The judge has to interpret your actions vis-a-vis the law And where you're found wanting, definitely you're guilty. But where you're, so it's not.
So it's at the discretion of the judge to
It's not
decipher
solely
whether what you said falls in the category of what could be termed as hate speech.
It has to be proven. It's a criminal case, for example. So it's not so much as you being accused of hate speech like we do in the media and you're taken to court and people think you're guilty. It's another thing itself to prove that the elements of that crime. So when you're taken to court, it's not really within his discretion, although he has a discretion in it, but the elements of that crime itself has to be proven. Where it is not proven, you're not guilty.
Very interesting. Let's bring in back the professor, of course, to discuss more about the amendments. You know, a lot of persons would have, earlier you told us about what necessitated the amendment, you know, to the code, saying that the realities of the 21st century, of course, necessitated this amendment to the code. Talk to us about the content. Now, earlier you were talking about sports, the aspect of sports and then content that producers have to put in when broadcasting in Nigeria. Talk to us more about what is expected and how this will benefit Nigeria, because in the long run, some persons are concerned that the international community, which is DSTV and some other TV providers, television content providers that we have, we might be putting them in the background and jeopardizing our relationship with them.
Thank you very much again. And let me address two major issues that appear to have been front burner on this debate and make the point that both innovations are actually in the national interest. Talking about hate speech, we have several historical contemporary examples of nations that have gone under on account of reckless use of hate speech. The celebrated story, tragically, of Rwanda is there for everybody to see. Even in the Nigerian history, we have had examples severally of certain inter-ethnic, inter-community rivalry that have been propagated and instigated by hate speech. And let me make the point. I like the elucidation of the lawyer, but let me make the point that for us in the broadcast regulator, our concern is with the broadcaster. We see the broadcaster as the purveyor of communication. And the code tries to guide the broadcaster in a way that they use the broadcast apparatus for constructive engagement. We don't have any business with individuals that come on any program. We do not censor broadcasting content in any way. You are free to bring your guests. You are free to schedule any kind of program you want to do, so long as it follows the stipulations of the broadcasting code. And the law is clear. You cannot allow someone to come on your station and use the platform of your station to render invectives on other people, to attack people on the basis of their sex, on the basis of their ethnicity, on the basis of their religion, to attack people in a way that you devalue their human rationality and make them look less than worthy. And we are saying that is not positive broadcasting. So the obligation actually is on the broadcaster. And there are ways the broadcasters handle this. You can record your program. Even if you must do it live as you are doing, you must have the capacity using technology and your professional acumen, to control and regulate what the speaker is saying. If it goes overboard, you must be able to probe. You must be able to question, because we have seen severally that a lot of people come with spurious, unverifiable claims, and many of them highly injurious to human sanity. So we are not particular about the criminality. The courts are there to deal with people individuals who go who make hateful speech or libelous claims and others, like you have said, but broadcasters must follow the broadcasting code. The broadcast apparatus must be used as a purveyor of democratization, of pluralism, of healthy political engagement. Now, the other issue is about exclusivity of programming content. And we are wondering why certain people are largely offended by this. We are saying Nigeria is a major broadcast or media content market in the whole wide world. Nigeria is reputed to be second or third, biggest movie production or cultural content production hub in the whole wide world. And we have a bank, a huge bank of creative-minded young Nigerians that are looking for opportunities to unleash their creative potential. How are they going to do that when you have big monopolies that buy up the entire market? When one individual comes and says, I have this content, and only me and me alone can broadcast this content. And we are saying diversify the content, democratize the content, create opportunities for other people to create ancillary benefits from what you have as a large enterprise. That is not too much to do in a country. If you have a country that's high, if you have a content that's high premium, and you know it's highly valuable, create little windows of channels so that the little upstarts can also have some grounds of engagement. So they too can drive advertising revenue on their own channels. That way you create employment. That way you are able to redistribute programming viability so that you reduce what I have seen over time to be a further extension of class stratification, elitist class stratification through content consumption. And some people just think that what they have is strictly for them. And what is even sad, my brother and sister, is that some of this content are original content belonging to the Nigerian people, the history and culture, you know, the fauna and flora of the Nigerian people, historical narratives, that they are recomposed, recreated, re-aestheticized, and then they now create a cocoon around it and take complete ownership, even denying the originators and the creators and the owners of this content to even have a chance to even view what will have probably advanced their own historical originalities. So that is what we are saying. We are saying be liberal enough, and it's not only in Nigeria. Many countries take that decision at a certain point in their nation's history. And it is purely to galvanize, to stimulate local industry and local growth. It is further an enhancement, a democratization of the media space in terms of availability, distribution, and consumption of content.
Okay, Professor Armstrong Idachaba, we have to leave it here now. This discussion is certainly going to continue so that Nigerians can understand these issues better and also own their own opinion and then take whatever, how they want to take it. Thank you very much, Professor Armstrong Idachaba, Acting Director General of the NBC. Thank you for talking to us. And Charles Ibuebu, thank you very much for coming as well.
Thank you.
We appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Nice to be with you.